Hey there, I'm Jen Yundt Coles. I'm the SIBO coach. I'm a functional medicine and integrative health coach, and I'm so excited to have a soulful conversation today.
Hello, sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here.
Hey everybody, it's Pearl Sharenza with Women's Successful Living, and you are listening to another conversation with Soulful Self-Care Conversations today's podcast. I've been so excited with a new name change. We're getting such great feedback. Thank you for all your likes and shares, so don't forget to do it below. And thanks so much for all your support to all of my guests. They are so appreciative of the support you give them and that you're giving us here on the show as well. So make sure you invite a friend, grab a cup of tea. If you're driving, be careful because you're going to want to take notes, but you can go back and read the show notes later. But in the meantime, I want to introduce you to my guest that's coming on today to join us, Jen Yundt Coles. She is a certified powerhouse in functional and integrative medicine health coaching with a specialized focus on conquering SIBO, small intestinal bacterial growth. Her mission to guide bold, ambitious individuals toward vibrant health and unstoppable energy by empowering them to master their digestion and wellness from the inside out. I'm excited to have this conversation because you guys, before we all came on here, I was sharing with her some challenges I've been having with a little vertical bout. And oh my gosh, she gave me some really cool stuff. So we're going to talk probably about that as well today because it was huge information. And then in the meantime, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Pearl. I know we've kind of been back and forth for trying to connect over the last few months, so I'm so glad that we finally get to be here together.
Yes, me too. I always feel like it's like in God's timing, right? It's how it's supposed to be, the way it falls out. Just like when I coach my
Exactly.
clients, I remind them everything is in the perfect timing. So I'm so excited to have you here today. And so Jen and I were talking ahead of time. She listened to the show, so she's got a sneak peek at the first question we're going to ask her. So we're going to dive right in. If you're new to the show, thank you for listening. One of the things that we always do on the show is I think it's fun to go back and think about how we were as kids, that little girl, Jen, when she was growing up, like what was she like growing up? What was her aspirations? What did she want to do when she got this big adult world we're in today? You know, I always share the story, my story, because I got to live by example about how when I was little, I thought I wanted to be this elementary school teacher, and I never had the opportunity to go the path that would lead me there. But jokingly, I say, I think I'm teaching the kids I would have taught in elementary school just in their adult life now to teach them to
Right.
be that kid again, right? So, Jen, what about you? Like, what was life like growing up for you? What did little girl Jen want to be when she grew up, and how is she showing up today?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I didn't really think about preparing it before I got on the call today, but I was just thinking about it now. I was raised in a military family, so we had a lot of rules to follow. So I was always kind of a little bit of a rebel. And also, I think that sort of fed into whatever predisposition I may have had for having anxiety and kind of being a perfectionist. So a lot of my childhood looked like that, but on the flip side of that, I was also very imaginative and creative, and I think that that is what I'm trying to grab onto as I'm an older person now and try to get back to some of that. I think as a child, I always had big aspirations. Of course, I wanted to be all sorts of things. I wanted to be like a makeup artist for movies or a lawyer. I mean, but it was kind of all over the place. And then when I got out of high school, I went to nursing school for 3 days and then I dropped out because I was a little bit too overwhelmed. But I think that drive to help people feel better, I think has always been there. And so that's where I am now as a health coach.
Okay, we have something else in common. I grew up as a Marine Corps brat. So, that whole, we didn't move around as much as my dad did 3 tours in Vietnam. So we kind of, our moving around was North Carolina to upstate New York because you got kicked off a base back then when your spouse went to war. So we go stay with my granny in upstate New York till my parents bought a house. But same kind of thing. We had regiment, we had rules. I was the oldest, so I don't know where you fall in your family, Jen, but I was like the example. Again, that's where my people pleasing came from too, because I was expected to follow the rules, be the example. Don't let your brothers and sisters break any rules. And so if you're not breaking rules, they shouldn't
Yeah.
break rules, right?
Yes, I was also the oldest, and
Oh, there you go.
both of my parents, interestingly, are the oldest of each of their families. And, so I think there were probably a lot of expectations and high standards there, but
Correct.
definitely, as I've, grown older and wiser over the decades, I've, learned about this whole, people pleasing and helping other people before myself sort of thing. And, um, how that plays into gut health, for instance, actually. So it's a big conversation that I'll have in my practice as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, like that caregiver you talk about, nursing school and dropping out, but it still was like that piece that was in you, and that's why I always ask the question because when we're younger, there's part of that like that's and I tell my clients when I coach my clients, you need to be mindful of what you're saying. The example is around your little kids because they're going to follow some of that path in their lifetime. So as that little us, that inner child, Jen and Pearl, we had these things we want to do as we grow up, and they show up differently than we thought. Like I said, I was going to be an elementary school teacher. I'm not doing that, but here I am coaching.
Yeah.
I thought I
Yeah.
wanted to be, a stay-at-home mom. I did that for a little while. It was not fun. So I found a way to have a business while I was doing that as well.
Yeah.
But and it's okay. The whole point too behind that is that it's okay for it to be different than when we are growing up, because sometimes in our life, with some listeners, they were told you're going to do this when you grow up, and especially in some cultures, because they want their kids to be successful. They want them to go be doctors or whatever that is. But then they realize, I don't want to do that. I want to be a yoga instructor. That's okay. But, there's that pressure as well. I want
Yeah.
to dive in. So the other thing I want to dive into right away is I want to start with your Shiro story because it leads to why you're doing what you're doing today. And that's, you called it your digestive distress and your broken heart syndrome, along with other mishaps you've had. You and I were talking before: car accident, traumatic brain injury, mold exposure. Oh my gosh, we'll talk about that too. I've got a friend that I'm very worried about her mold exposure. But,
Yeah.
tell us like that, give us some background on how that led you to, I mean, I can imagine when we take control of our life and our health, it starts like we start really getting into it. We want to empower and change the world, right? So how did that shape you into leading where you are today?
Yeah, it's been a process. Obviously, not all of these things happened to me at one time or happened for me. It depends on how you look at it, right? Even just a childhood of, digestive distress. I think I was just an anxious child in general. um, had all kinds of viruses when I was young. I was a preemie and I wasn't breastfed. So, we know a lot more about the microbiome and all of that and the importance of that whole birthing process to help babies get on the right foot, right? So I think maybe perhaps I, came into the world a little bit behind the game. So I kind of went through my childhood and teeny years, trying to navigate all the stomach aches and all of that. And by the time I was in my later teens, I started self-medicating with like, Mylanta and Pepto and ibuprofen before school and all of those kind of things. And finally going to college and meeting different types of people who are asking questions, because that's the part, that phase of life where you're starting to ask more questions and explore new things and meeting different people from different cultures and all of that. I think that was probably one of the first catalysts for me to start learning more about my body and my specific needs. And that kind of manifested itself in, learning that I was lactose intolerant, and then eventually learning that I have an antibody reaction to a very specific wheat protein. So it's not necessarily gluten, but still I avoid it, right? And so learning things like that so that I could like slowly build on that. And then, like you mentioned, like a car accident led me to trying to figure out what are some alternative ways that I can manage my pain, because I was having a lot of chronic pain from the accident. And that led me to studying Chinese medicine and acupressure. So, acupressure is like acupuncture. You're using the same meridians and the energies and the points, but you're doing it for yourself with touch instead of a needle. And, so that kind of just, everything kind of built on itself, right? So then I had my children back to back, really close together. And I think the stress of that, caused a lot of, you know, trauma and some autoimmunity dynamics. And so then it was, my next mission was let me try to figure out how to help myself in this way, right? And you know, I'm also kind of a serial entrepreneur. I have a lot of businesses in my day, and one of them was a gluten-free bakery. So I started doing that. And of course, for years, I was waking up in the middle of the night, right, to start the baking and trying to run my family at the same time. And as a go-getter, I'm sure some of your audience is in the same boat. Mothers trying to do it all, right? It finally caught up with me, and that's what led me to having broken heart syndrome. And so that was probably, obviously a rock bottom moment for me. I was quite young still, and it was a wake up call. Like, there has to be more for me than this. I don't want to lie in my bed with stomach aches and frustration and isolation and depression, and then not have a plan of what to do and how to help myself. And so, because always had that sort of seed of hope, I'm constantly looking for what's going to help me, right? So I've experimented a lot on myself. And then eventually, that led to health coaching and then putting myself through functional medicine school after figuring out what SIBO was. And so that kind of led me down that path. And like I said, it kind of builds on itself. And now I don't even remember what your original question was,
No,
but
I mean,
basically that's how I got here.
yeah, no, because that's part of like, one of the things I always talk about here on the show is like showing up as stepping into your share self. And our share self shows up differently, whether it's your health, whether it's, saboteurs and judges that, hold us back from succeeding or moving forward or putting ourselves first. That's such an important part of our journey and our story. And one of the things I like that you said too is you realize that you're missing self-loyalty, right? That you're telling your clients to dial up their self-care, but you weren't owning that own self-love,
Yeah, that's right.
and that's so powerful that when we realize that, especially as coaches, and it's interesting you put that in there because I will have clients that come to me that want to work with me, and I know they've worked with other coaches, and they'll say, "Oh, like, why me?" And they're like, "'Cause you show up. Like, I watch you on social media, everything you do, you're honest, you share your story, good, bad, or indifferent, you let us all know." Sorry, I got a tickle in my throat today. And so it's like that when we realize that we're not showing up the way we want to show up, that's a huge aha moment. I know for me, it was, I call myself now, since you and I talk, I had some even more deep dive about what I do. It's to say yes to your life coach because I want you to say yes. I want to say yes to my life. And so when we go through this people pleasing and show up for everybody else and we don't take care of us, we get burnt out, we get stressed out, our health goes, you and I talk about our gut, it affects everything in our body. And when we finally realize I need to sit back and do an audit of my body and what the heck am I doing in my life? And you start doing the things like with people pleasing, I share on the show here how I took an identity and destiny course. At the end of 6 weeks, we had to give our I am statement. I still said I was all my titles, right? And I know we were recording you before we got on. So the listeners that are coming on, we always do this intro call and Jen recorded it. And, we could do, if I did bloopers, it would be a lot of fun. But I'm not going to do a blooper to Jen. But one of the things that struck me when Jen said it, she didn't say it with this intro, was you said who you are, what you do, then you shared your titles, right? And mom and those things. And the thing is we tend to forget to do that. We tend to forget to show up for who we are and what we love to do. And then the titles, right? And then so that leads to burnout. That leads to, like you said, not like, and I'm just gonna say the missing the self-loyalty, like what you said. We need to dial up our self-care, but we forget we self-care everybody else. And even if you're not a coach and you're listening to us right now, I'm sure there's somebody that's watching or listening to us and saying, yeah, I show up for everybody else, but I forget me.
Yeah.
And so that's where that's where that you need to make that switch. You need to start doing something to do that. So as you went through this, I mean, like you said, it didn't all happen at one time. It happened over time. And then you went on this journey to, start doing something about it, getting your health coaching and all that. What did you find in your life as you're doing this? How did you find the shift happen, and how hard was it to accept the shift, right? Because we get in our way. Our mind's our best friend, but our worst enemy. When we get in our way and we tell ourselves, I can go do it this way, when really we
Yeah.
have to, there's a path for a reason. Like I love when I coach my clients, I like to tell them, when we come into this world, whether whoever you believe in, but for me, it's God, He's got it planned out. When we think instead of going straight on the road that that has for us, and we think, oh, I can go left or right, you're going to come back the road anyways, right? It's
Yeah.
not, you have to I think when I went to a church retreat one time, she said, let go, let God, right? So we have to let go. So when you started to let go and realize I need to go down this path, how did you see this shift happen in your life?
Yeah. So, what a great question. And before I answer that, I want to swing back to something that you said previously. So, you know how you were saying, like, we put ourselves last and we're not taking care of ourselves, and it's kind of a form of disloyalty and not loving on ourselves. And I think it's really interesting too because I see this in my practice sometimes where women especially will put themselves last, but then they also start becoming more aware that they should be putting themselves first, but they aren't doing it. So then they get bitter. And so there's all these other, emotions tangled up in that, and that can definitely affect our gut health. So I just wanted to reflect that back to you really quickly. I think as far as this journey and this shift goes, I'll be honest. I think it was kind of like a part A and a part B. So when I had broken heart syndrome, my kids were still really young. We were doing travel soccer and I was dealing with a SIBO, but I didn't know it was SIBO at the time. And, just really felt like I was malnourished and kind of, like an untethered balloon and just kind of like floating around and trying to find answers and just anxious and depressed, really, and felt alone because my doctors were really kind of dismissing me. And, so I think there was a moment there. Well, I know there was a moment there. I was laying in my bed and I thought, "Mm, this does feel like rock bottom." In that moment, I felt like it was, right? And so, that was my part A shift where I realized, okay, I am the one that's going to have to heal myself. There isn't anyone else who's going to show up for me. That's already been, shown to me by my doctors, right? And unfortunately, as much as and as kind my as well, I'm tripping over my words, as kind as my husband is, he just didn't really get it. And, typically men just want to fix the problem. And so when they don't know how to fix the problem, they kind of back up a little bit and kind of check out a little bit because emotionally they don't know how to help, even though that's the thing they want to do. So that was kind of the first moment of realizing, oh, I really have to take ownership of this. And so, what am I going to do? So, creating a plan for myself is the way that I did it. In hindsight, I wish that I had reached out more to friends and family to help because I did kind of take that on alone and it was kind of heavy to carry. Right? And so years go by and I'm figuring out my first taste of functional medicine with a new practitioner and learning about what SIBO is. And then that dove me into a whole nother rabbit hole. I'm kind of a research science brain type of person. And so that led me to functional medicine school and, growing my business and helping people with SIBO. And even within that journey, I was still not walking my talk. I know how to help and teach and guide and educate my clients, but I wasn't living the balanced life that I should have been. And so, and speaking to what we were talking about before we started recording, the head injuries and things like that, I was going, working on a home renovation project with all the other things going on in my life, being a mom and kids getting ready to go to college and running my business and all the things. And I blacked out and I fell and I hit my head. I was up at a height in my kitchen and hit my head on a quartz countertop. And luckily, my son happened to be home that day, which normally he wouldn't have been. And he found me and called 911. So that was my part B shift because it took me a year to overcome those concussion symptoms. I had to slow my business. I really had to make my health and well being and sanity a priority because I just realized, well, one, maybe the universe is telling me something like, hey, Jen, you better slow down. And then, it's a constant reminder to myself every day. Like I get up and I say, okay, what do I need today and how am I going to get it? And I think about how I'm going to take care of myself that day before I even leave my bedroom and get ready for work. Because if I don't, it's all downhill from there because I'm constantly doing, and I have to remind myself it's time for a break. And oftentimes I'll hear my mom's voice. She has a very thick Southern accent, and she'll say, Jenny, you need to give yourself a break. And so I think about that. And I wish I had that voice in my head many years ago, right before all of this happened. But really, that's what drives me at this point is that I see so many women who have this amazing potential and creativity and passion, and they want to keep going. And now they have gut issues that are kind of helping them play, making them play small. I'm now on the scene. At first, I was just kind of focused on what was happening in the gut, but really, my bigger message now is how can we still achieve those things without sacrificing our health? And how to actually optimize our health so that we are in a better place to achieve those things. So that's really where the shift, I think, has come for me personally, but also in my practice.
I wrote down so I take notes as my guests were talking. I'm like, oh, let's talk about that. And so a couple of things I want to circle back on is like, first of all, explain SIBO and broken heart syndrome to those maybe you're coming in late that don't understand what that is. Will you explain what
Yeah.
that is?
Yeah. So I'll start with broken heart syndrome. The fancy name for it is, and it's always a tongue twister, so bear with me here. It's Takotsubo myocardiopathy. Okay, so essentially, you're having all the symptoms of the heart attack because you're now having this inflammation of the heart. Like for me, I had the chest pain, the back pain, it went up to my jaw, down my arm, all those, the nausea, all of that kind of stuff was at play for me. But usually it happens for typically older people. For instance, someone who has lost their spouse after 60 years of marriage, it's just so devastating. They don't know how they're going to breathe. That kind of trauma or stress. And so for me in my early 40s, having that happen was a wake up call. And we're actually seeing more of it, unfortunately, now post COVID and vaccines, unfortunately, because it did cause some inflammation and myocarditis for some people. SIBO, SIBO, stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is also a mouthful. And SIBO can happen for a number of reasons, but some of the more common reasons are things like antibiotic use, because it shifts the microbiome, a bout of food poisoning, very common, surgeries, or having things like your gallbladder removed, because then you don't have that good bile flow to act as an antibacterial. But the most common one I see, especially for SIBO and SIBO relapse, is stress. Because when we're stressed and we're stuck in that fight or flight, we aren't prioritizing digestion and what we call the migrating motor complex, which is the thing that sweeps the food through. And so we end up with things like SIBO and an imbalance in the gut. Notably, we're also seeing, and I'm seeing this more in my practice too, women who have been on things like Ozempic because it's essentially slowing down your digestion so you feel fuller longer. But when you don't have that optimal cleansing wave or sweeping through of food and bacteria, it starts to accumulate and can start to ferment. And then you've got all kinds of issues. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. That's really interesting. Like the broken heart, I've heard broken heart syndrome, but I would just want to make sure I understood that. But I didn't realize like that, there's so many things that since COVID like are coming up. I mean, my son Nate, like he got the shot and there's like he's had some heart things come up too for him. He's only 25. So, I'm very aware of that. I go into my doctor's office and I'm like, okay, doc, this is what we're going to talk about because that's the next thing I want to go to. Like the doctor's dismissing, I'm like, this is what I want to talk about. This is the things I want. And it's funny because my husband and I go to the same practice. And it's a husband and wife practice. I see the husband, he sees the wife. The husband and I go in and I'm like, here's my list, here's what I want to do. And my husband goes in, and so one point, I know you and I were talking before about the vitamin line that I love to use isotonics in what I do. And so Chuck all of a sudden's like, I'm not taking your vitamins anymore. They got too much sugar. I'm like, Charles, it has a sugar of a grape. It's not that much sugar in it, right? So he's taking the vitamins. There's a lot of pain. He couldn't find out 4 years later he needed double hip surgery. So we just finished up his second one. But so I'm like, I'm going with you to the doctor today. I'm going to go and talk with Dr. Narani. So we go in there and she's, we're talking and I'm like, doctor, he's not taking his vitamins. She goes, well, I don't really believe in vitamins, so it's okay. I'm like, oh, I was like, "Brr." So and I love her to death. They're amazing doctors. And then fast forward, like I'm all, I went in there, I couldn't see him, I wasn't feeling good. She looked at my blood work and she's like, Pro, I think it was something with my cholesterol or something. I see this number here. We really should put you on such and such. I'm like, I just looked at her, she goes, I know you're going to talk to my husband first, right? I go, yes, I'm going to talk to him first. Cause usually, I go in very, so I remember when I went in to go see him after that, he's like, you were a topic of conversation at my dinner table a couple weeks ago. I'm like, I was. He goes, yeah, it's time you go on the medicine. My wife was right. I go, are you saying that just because you don't want to be in her bed? He's like, no, 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 no. But that's what I love about them is that neither one of them dismiss us, and we have to. It's the one thing I said to my son. So talking about his heart, they send him to a cardiologist to do the heart monitor. Well, first they tell him, oh, we don't have it yet. It took him a month to get a heart monitor. I'm like, Nate, do you understand that's baloney? Do you understand that I could go in there at 60 years old, I can get that heart monitor. You could go right behind me and they'd tell you don't have it. Number one. Number two, when they put it on him, they didn't tell him to push, they didn't give him instructions to push the button. He just had it on, thought, oh, it's going to do what it's supposed to do. So when he brought it back, they said there was
So he
no
wasn't recording. Yeah.
yes. And so he's like, well, you didn't try to push the button. So instead of giving it back to him, they said, well, you're fine. I'm like, Nathaniel Everett, you need to take control. I go, those doctors have 15 minutes with you. That's it, So
Yeah.
I got really frustrated with them. And so I'm like, you got to learn at 25 years old. I'm going to let you take care of your health. You got to learn. But, and for those that are listening, never, ever, if you feel like get second opinions. Like I actually have they call it an aneurysm, but there's another name for it. The short name is aneurysm, but I have one of my valves of my heart and I have one in my stomach. And so I'm always aware of it, right? And so I'm always like, okay, this is what I want to know. I'm always on top of all of that stuff. So I'm like, I'm never ever like never. I've learned early on, don't if I
Yeah.
want a second opinion, I'm getting a second opinion, right? But the other thing I like what you said is you took ownership, you create a plan, but you also acknowledge you didn't ask for help. And so I want the listeners to know that that's the number one thing is you got to take ownership of your health. And go back to what we just said about doctors and things like that. You have to take ownership of your health because you're the only one that's with your body 24/7, and you have to think that you need to be aware if something doesn't feel right, follow up on it. But asking for help is not a bad thing. But we as women tend to think, oh, I can do it all. I don't have to ask for help, right? And that's a big thing and there are some men that are like that, but that's a big thing for women. And especially I think you were saying earlier about how, men want to fix everything, right? We don't need
Yeah.
some I tell my husband, I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to listen. Just
Yeah.
hear me out. Let me vent. Let me just tell you how I feel about something, right? But then
Yeah.
we'll fix everything, but we want to make sure everybody's okay. So it's interesting that the two different things and how that shows up in our lives. But
Yeah. Do you
yeah.
mind if I reflect back
Yeah.
really quick on
I
that?
just said, so what are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of my big things that I always say to someone who isn't working with me yet, but they get on a strategy call, for instance, one of the first things I say to them is, I'm here to create a safe space for you. And we're going to have a little bit of a conversation so you can get to know me and I can get to know you and see if I can help you. Right. But the thing is that I want you to take away from this call, whether we work together or not, is for you to be your own best advocate, to to keep asking questions and to stand up for yourself, ask for second opinions if you need to, and find someone who resonates with you. Like I said, whether or not that's me or someone else, you always want to have a good relationship with your practitioner, whether it's an MD, like a conventional MD or a naturopath or functional medicine or whatever. And someone who's going to listen to you, who's going to see you as a whole person and not just one organ. Because I'm constantly saying we are not just our small intestines, we're all the parts connected, and we're also our environment and our relationships and our jobs. And so it's really important to Be that person for yourself, like you said, have ownership, but to ask for help because there are other people who can help guide you. Obviously, no one else is going to fix or heal you. That's your responsibility. But sometimes we need help. Even as coaches, we hire our own coaches and medical team people, right? So it's important for us to think outside of the box that way. Additionally, I'll also say, unfortunately, the way the system is in this country is that, we might get 10 minutes in our doctor's office. And to your point, excuse me, to your point, we often have that 10 minutes, and it's a really good idea to have a list. This is what I want to talk about today so that you can kind of stay on track. Some of us get like what we call white coat syndrome, and we go in the office and we kind of like blank out, like, oh, I forgot to ask about that, right? And so it's really important. So if I have someone in my practice who's going to go see their doctor, we always talk about this is what you're going to ask for, this is what you're going to advocate for, right? So that they feel empowered and educated in whatever they're asking for. And I'm lucky that way as a functional medicine practitioner and owning my own practice, I get to see people from between 45 minutes to an hour and a half, depending on what the session is, so that we can really dive in deeper and ask better questions. Yeah.
I love you like me. I love to give my clients because I have some clients that have therapists and the same thing. They only get that little bit of window to work with their therapist. With me, I can give them an hour in some cases to work together. And I can do a little more in depth things. Like I can ask them things that maybe they can be restricted to, and I love to do that because I think it's just like you said, I have a coach, I have a business coach, and I have a life coach too. I have two different coaches in my
Yeah.
life because we need
Same.
them too. We're not just like going, oh, like when my son passed, 2.5 years ago, I was so glad. I created this Shiro League, and I saw a need during COVID where all these women online were like going, I got to teach my kids elementary school or high school. I send them to school, and then I got to be home with my kids and my spouse all day long. Oh my God. I called it a Calgon take it away moment, but I'm not allowed to leave the house. And so I just started, I'm like, what can I do? Like, I felt like I needed to do something. So we started this like 30-day self-care challenge where every day you had to do something for self-care. And on Sunday we would meet and talk about how was it, when you had the beginning. I always call it a way to end the week and begin the week, on a good note. And so release and then receive. That's what I try to say. And so, I create this not knowing that, 4 years later, when my son passed, that group of women that I put together were going to be women that I needed myself, that I need to come back to them for that support. And so it's powerful, like asking for help, like I was talking about, and having a list of things you need. It's a good plan. It's like being prepared. It's like, going back to that whole creating a plan and being prepared to, and then also, what are your follow-up questions? Like I went to, when before my son passed, I'd gone to the hospital. I knew I'd had this heart thing for years, and I normally go get it checked. But this one time I was having, these issues, and I thought I was having a heart attack. So I'm like, it's got to be something with what I have. So I went in and they did all this test. And that's when I got diagnosed with the one in my stomach. And he says they call it an aneurysm, but it has something to do with when I breathe in, it's like the way it closes. And so
Yeah.
I'll take a deep breath, right? So I went and saw him. I went to the cardiologist after that, being in the hospital. Then my son passed. And then I just life got away from me. I never went back for a follow-up. And I was like, I think I need to go for this follow-up and go get this done. And my younger son was getting married. It was this past October. And so I wasn't fully going in prepared like I normally do when I go to the doctors. So he comes in, he says, well, everything's fine. You're all good. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. I felt great. And then you and I, before we came on, I was starting to have these dizzy spells. I went to my regular doctor and I was like, hey, this is what's happening. And I go, it's really weird. The cardiologist said I'm all good. He goes, what to see a cardiologist? I didn't get a follow-up. Like he didn't get the follow-up report. And then I told him, I go, it's funny you said that. I said, because I was just saying I literally said to my husband the day before, I'm like, he didn't know tests. So how do you know I was okay? He didn't put me through any tests, right? And normally I go in prepared, like we we're talking about, I go in prepared. And so my doctor's like, okay, we're going to go, another cardiologist is going to go double check all the stuff that's happening. But I was kicking myself because normally, like you said, I'm prepared. I have paper, so it's always that
Yeah.
ownership of everything. But so now tell us, like, when your client, I love what you said too, when you help when you do that strategic call, when somebody calls about first working with you, I love that you create that safe space to let them know that it's a sacred space. Because I think sometimes we get worried about, where do I tell them this or tell them that, but I think we, especially as coaches, we can't fully show up and help you if we don't know everything, if we're not fully aware of what you need help with. So
Yeah.
as you do that, and then they take that next step to working with you, what sort of things that your clients can expect on that? It's funny, when I got to introduce you to um, a doctor over here in Tarpon Springs, because she is amazing, and we call her the what do we call her? It's not the gut doctor. When we talk about, she talks about gut all the time. I need to put you
Uh-huh.
guys together. But
Yeah.
so tell me, like, what's that journey like for you when, as a client comes in, what can they expect after they do that call? They know I mean, who doesn't want to work with you when they first talk with you, right? You're so knowledgeable. What can they expect from that?
Yeah. So this kind of ties into what you were just talking about. So one of my huge goals, because of my own personal experience with going to GIs, being dismissed, I've even been told by a GI, Jen, I think you know more about SIBO at this point than I do. Here's an antidepressant, because they didn't know how else to help me. Right. So I've been in that rock bottom place of feeling like, well, if my doctor's not going to help me, who's going to help me? So I understand the kind of like low grade panic and anxiety of like looking on the support groups online and like doctor Googling till you can't see straight and all that kind of stuff. Right. And feeling isolated because you're not walking around with a cast on your arm, but you've got this ongoing digestive issue that's keeping you isolated, causing brain fog, keeping you up at night, you're not sleeping well, you don't feel good, right? But it doesn't present all the time on the outside. And it's for women, especially, a lot of silent suffering. So that's part of why I like to create that space at the very beginning and say, hey, you know what? I've got you because I've been there. I went through it for decades. I was completely malnourished. I couldn't, leave the house at times because I was in toilet prison because, it's just like all of these things that affects your relationships. I couldn't be intimate with my husband because I felt gross and bloated and all the things. And so I like for people to know that I get what they're talking about, right? So that's part of it. I think one of the things that my clients will often say after they've gone through my program is that they appreciated the education and the empowerment that I provided. And that goes for everyone, especially, I mean, even those who didn't get 100% better because they felt more empowered to keep going and move on, right? And so obviously the goal is to help people feel better at the end of our time together, especially right at the beginning. I like to kind of get some rapid relief so that they get, you know, that catalyst that they need to keep going, that have trust in their body's ability to heal itself. It's really important to have that kind of rapid relief at the beginning. But when folks come in, I think that was your question. What does it look like? Um, if someone comes to one of my strategy calls and they're like, "Hey, Jen, I want to do this," we kind of start onboarding them, and I have like a 6-month program because, when I first started working with gut issues, I thought, 3 months is probably good. But I would see people kind of slide back to their old lifestyle habits or things would come up in life. I mean, 6 months is a good chunk of time where seasons are changing and, jobs might be changing or you might be moving. And so we can always reset if we need to. The other thing too in that 6 months is that I'm talking about so many other things besides just a gut microbiome, right? I'm talking about the gut brain connection. I'm talking about sleep. I'm talking about mindful eating, like habits that they can implement and take with them after the fact so that they keep healing on their journey. And so that's kind of what it looks like. Sometimes we'll have conversations about their relationship that they feel like is not supportive or a conversation that they need to have with their boss. Obviously, I'm not a licensed therapist, but these things come up in a coaching session because they affect your gut health and vice versa. So that's kind of what it looks like. Yeah.
That's so cool. I love, we're very similar in that our approaches, because one of the things too is like educating. I know when I first started on this journey, I was just health and wellness. That's all I did. It was just help my clients through a very strict regimen, weight loss program that I had done myself and lost my weight with. And I've pretty much been doing really well with it. And I would have clients go, Pearl, can you talk to my friend? Because, it was a program where you couldn't have any carbohydrates. And so if you had one, it could set you back. And the lady who owned the clinic that I work with, if they went to go see her, you're made to feel like you're at the principal's office. For me, I was like, okay, so what was happening? Like, where was going on? I wanted to know about the emotion behind the choice, right? And so that's when they started going, well, they would tell me when walk through, okay, when that emotion comes up, here's some things you can try, different things like that. So I started referring friends. Will you talk to my friend? She doesn't need to lose weight, but like you're so like you get it, you understand things can happen. So after probably a good month of tea dates with people, I was like, okay, I got to do something, and that's where I went on this journey to become, a say yes to your life coach, because I realized I too was a people pleaser, that I was showing up for everybody else instead of for me, and how it was affecting my life, how it's affecting my health, and then when my son passed 2.5 years ago, I realized like I started putting a lot of my weight back on because the emotional eating and all of that, I had to like dig deep back into my toolbox and like, okay, get this back under control. This is dangerous for you, and taking that control. But to understand in life, we have to remember, like we're talking to, is we're going to have those things come up, but to have somebody like you, somebody like me that can come back to and go, I need to check in. I need to check back in on ourselves. It's so important. And so I love the work you're doing. I think it's so important that, our gut health is, oh my gosh, so amazing that
It's
and we don't
foundational.
realize it does. We don't realize how much it affects us. Like, it's just so crazy. It's funny because I had a different name for my company when I was just doing health and wellness. And so people will look up stuff like they'll want to do a colon cleanse, right? And for some reason, my 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 husband now has my old office number. We switched over to his business. And so they'll call and he's like, I got another colon cleanse for you. I'm like, I don't do they want that big machine thing. I'm like, I don't do that. And my husband's like, you should look that up. I'm like, I don't want to get into that because it's just like I'll refer them out to people. That's not my jam
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
But it's so true. Like, we need to recognize that our gut can affect so many things in our lives. So I think this has been, I just looked down and like our time is flying by. I think this has been amazing, fun conversation. So I want to let everybody know, because of your amazing talent and knowledge, they need to reach out to you. So tell everybody, Jen, how can people find you and how can they reach out to you? And if you're driving, don't worry, we'll put this in the show notes as well so you can look it up later, but go ahead and share that with
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to put in a little plug to what you said here, wrapping up and everything, is that it's so important as practitioners, but also just women in general, as we're living our lives and whether or not we're dealing with health struggles or not, to, you know, figure out what that passion is, what is that joy, what's no longer serving us, and then what is serving us, what's bringing us joy, what's lifting us up, and focus on that, right? You were kind of saying that how your business has kind of shifted over time. I think that's completely natural and normal. And just as human beings in general, I would highly recommend it because staying stuck is no fun. Yeah. The best way to find me is my website. It's kind of my hub. My contact information is on there, my program information. I have a free quiz on there. Like if you're not sure about if you have SIBO or where to go next, it's www.thesibocoach.com. Again, that's SIBO, thesibocoach.com. And that's the best way. You can book a call for me, call with me from there. My bio's on there. You can read a little more about what my story is. Yeah.
I love that. We're going to put that in everything. It's funny you talk about passion and joy. That's one of the first things that my clients, when they come to me, the first homework they have is we create their joy list. And
Uh-huh.
so they're like, oh, I can tell you. I'm like, I want 10 things. They're like, oh, I can think of 10 things. Like, no, 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 no. We're going to start with the first one. It takes 6 weeks to do this process because we're going to break each one down. So you might tell me, coaching brings you joy. Well, what about coaching brings you joy? And then you give me an answer. What about that bring, like, to the point to we get to like peeling the onion about why does that really bring you joy?
Yeah.
And then we go to the not to do list, the things not to do, like not tell yourself you're not worthy, not listen to negative self, those kind of things, and work on that list. And so that then you get back to your passion and joy. And then we start, okay, pick one thing on that joy list. What are you passionate about the most on that list? Let's start working there.
Yeah.
Because you're right. We have
I
to.
love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
that's the first thing I do with my clients. It's part of our whole Shiro method, the Shiro coaching program. It's all part of
Yeah.
that, because once you do that, then I feel like truly like what the acronym means. I feel like they start showing up, that stronger self that they believe that they can do this. It doesn't, I'm not weak because I'm going to say no. It doesn't mean I don't care for somebody. It just means that I care for me first. And then I tell them, then you're not going to have the nighttime midnight wake ups because now you're stressed, so you're happier. You're not waking up in the middle of the night, unhappy because I forgot to send an email or call that person, or go pick up the cupcakes for the school, whatever that is.
Right.
Because midnight wake ups. And then I'm like, then what happens is you start shifting and you become empowered to go like, I can go do something on my joy list. Like, I can tell them no because I'm going to go to the beach today and,
Yeah.
whatever that is.
Yeah.
And then I tell them as we work through the whole process, then you start, like as we get our health back, and we show up that radiant self, like we become more radiant, and that I call it the glow up, in our life,
Yeah.
so that at the end of the game, back to what the question was actually at the beginning of the show was, what did you want to be when you grow up? We start showing up as that original self, that little girl that was there. She's still there. And now you're letting it come out. You're letting her play. You're letting her do all the things she wants to do as this beautiful adult person. And
Yeah.
it's so much fun to watch the transition happen. So,
Yeah, I just want to speak to that really quickly. That's one
yeah,
of the first things we do in session together with my clients as well. We have this thing called living your life by design. And so it's this whole sort of like journaling process. So we
mhm,
do a lot of journaling in my practice, but yeah, it's creating that vision of who they want to be
right.
after dealing with all the gut stuff so that it helps them keep the light at the end of the tunnel and
Right.
keep that alive. Because, sometimes the SIBO journey is kind of a little bit of a roller coaster. So it's
Yeah.
good to have something to look forward to, right?
Yeah, well, 100%, 100%. Okay, so before I let you go, we talked
Yeah.
about vision. So I got to do a little plug. You brought it up. I'm going to plug myself. So here we go.
Okay, go
So
for it.
one of the things that came up for me, like between like Christmas and New Year's time frame, I just kept seeing on TikTok these people flipping through this book about, the creating your vision. I'm all about creating your vision, but I want it to be different. I want you to get energy from what you create. So they had this book, and I went and looked at the book. I'm like, it's just pictures you put on the board. I'm like, no, we need something better. So I decided to create a magazine, a vision magazine. I don't know if you've seen me posting.
Awesome.
So this is the vision magazine,
Oh, look
and
at it.
it's two sides. So that's the front side, and that's the back side. And
I
then
love it.
inside the book, there's worksheets. You create, like I've already started writing in mine. You start doing your goals, but there's a page to put your pictures on. So
Uh-huh.
and then the other side is your journey. You journal about it, and there's your before and after. Before you started the journey and after. And then it just goes right through that. Like there's 8 quadrants of your wheel of life. And then there's coloring pages and all
I
kinds of stuff.
love
So
it.
it's so cool. I have it on my website, but I'm teaching classes on it now. And I actually have a couple of coaches that are like, can I buy it and teach them? I'm like, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's so
What a
much fun.
great idea. I would say gold star to you, Pearl.
Thank you. I literally don't even have to do a Reiki session for gosh sakes. I'm like, I need to do something. I'm going to go do this. And it's just like, it's my first book I did by myself on Amazon. We're bestsellers. So
Uh-huh.
it's a lot of fun. So when you said vision, I'm like,
Fabulous.
oh, because I really believe in having visions. I do this. And then I also create vision purses with my clients so that you
Uh-huh.
put it on a purse. It's like a bamboo kind of purse. And I believe if you carry it with you, it's always that energy's there. And then I make you rip it off. As you achieve it, you got to rip it off the purse.
Ah,
So your purse becomes an ugly purse because it's no longer serving you. You've done everything you
right,
need to do.
right,
So
right.
yeah. So it's so
That's
cool.
an
Oh my
awesome
God. I'm so
concept.
glad to share that. All right. So listen, I can't let you go without doing our cards. So I have forewarned that we're doing the cards. So I'm going to shuffle the cards and then you are going to tell me when to stop. Here we go.
Yeah. Stop.
All right. So yours says, how do I care for myself? How do you care for yourself? What's one of your favorite self-care things you like to
Yeah. Oh, this is an easy one.
do? She said she thought she was going to get a hard one. There have been hard ones on here.
How do I care for myself? Well, we kind of alluded to it at the beginning because I had recorded it in the other promo, but I didn't end up saying it for the last one. But I'm an aspiring rocker, so I've been playing guitar for many years, and I write my own songs. And I've recently started voice lessons because I
Oh,
felt like, oh, my throat chakra needs to open up a little bit.
I love
And
it.
so that's part of how I take care of myself. And I also just love, love, love taking my hot Epsom salts baths every night. It's just like the thing I look forward to from the moment I wake up in the morning. So
I
yeah, so
love
that's
it.
an easy one.
That is so, so cool. Oh my God, that was so much fun. Well, I'm so glad you came on today and I'm glad you spent time I'm glad you got an easy card. Next time I'll make sure I get you a hard card.
Okay. Sounds good.
I just want to thank you for coming. I want to thank all the listeners for listening with us. I want you to like and subscribe below. Go listen and watch the show notes. Make sure you reach out to Jen as well. All her information will be connected here. But I want to remind each and every one of you that you come into this world. You are a rough oyster on the outside. There's a lot of work we have to do, including cleaning up the gut. And when you get there, you're going to find your own inner pearl to greatness. And I hope today you got some great information to take care of your health and go find your inner pearl to greatness. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Pearl.
Thank you. Hey, everybody, that was so much fun. I just love talking with Jen about all the different things, especially gut. Gut is such an important part of our life, important part of taking care of our health so that we can make sure that we're showing up the way we want to. And like we were talking, I love that we wrap that up with the passion and our joy list. Like, I want you to really think about, when was the last time you did a joy list? When was the last time you sat down and really wrote out the things that brought you joy? And if it's something that you're not familiar with how to do, or even the not to do list, like making a list of things you have to stop doing that's not allowing you to work on your joy list, right? Because part of stepping into your shiro self is starting to show up, not just for yourself in your health, but also in your overall life. Like if you don't overflow your cup, it's so, so true. You can't show up for not only you, but those you love and the things you love to do. So if this is something you're struggling with and you're like, what the heck is a joy list? Like, or I want to dig deep in my joy list, down below, you can reach out to us. There's some information to reach out to me. I would love to help you and talk to you about how you step into your shiro self. Or you can just go to wsliving.com and reach me there. Again, wsliving.com. But I just want to thank you so much for coming and joining us and being part of the show. And remember to like and subscribe below. Go be your shiro self. Thank you.
All clean. Why'd it take